Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is Action Comics, issue number 424, dated June 1973. This is at a time where this is one of the additional titles that the Superman comic book had. Action Comics usually did not have a full length story for Superman. There was usually Superman, and then there would be a secondary hero in the comic. Sometimes it was Green Arrow. In this case, it's Green Arrow. Sometimes it was Aquaman. Sometimes it was the Atom. It was sort of a way of keeping these characters fresh and in the mindset of the readers, but at the same time didn't employ a lot of resources since none of these characters had their own title. So if you were interested in seeing these characters, you'd have to pick it up in Action Comics or something like that. As far as the cover's a pretty good cover. It kind of is a homage to the original King Kong, as we see Gorilla Grodd is on top of a very tall tower. At the time, the World Trade Center had just opened. I think it took 5 years to build it, but the trade centers had just opened. So that would have been in the imagination of the writer, of the artist, I should say, of the cover, and that would be Nick Cardy, who is DC's top cover guy. And we see Gorilla Grodd is spinning Superman by the cape around and around.
Now you spin me right round, baby, right round, like a record, baby, right round, round, round.
Kind of like a lasso. So we can see that Gorilla Grodd will be a formidable opponent for the Man of Steel. The cover just tells you that there's a Green Arrow story in it. Doesn't necessarily tell you what the story is. So, these didn't have much respect for that character, really. Although the character did have two very powerful, life-changing moments within the comic. The character overall never really grew, and you can see in this in the Green Arrow adventure. It's a very silly story. So anyway, we'll open up. We see kind of a summary of what's coming up, rather than going directly into the story as Marvel would do. DC would kind of either reimagine the cover or give some type of small preview of what to expect in this story. And here we see a Gorilla Grodd. He's riding this kind of this water wave, and he's holding Superman up, and Superman looks unconscious, and Gorilla Grodd is making all these kind of very grandiose statements that he's going to control the world. He's doing this right near the UN, and this story is called Gorilla Grodd's Grandstand Play. The creative team is Elliot Maggin, who is one of the Superman writers. And this is edited by Joel Schwartz, who's kind of a comic book legend. He knew how to tell a story. Usually he would tell the writers, hey, give me a story where Superman is doing this. We see the art is by Kurt Swan and Murphy Anderson. And those are two classic Superman artists. They do a pretty good job. There's nothing wrong with the art. The story itself is fine. It's kind of entertaining, but it's also problematic in that it's not very memorable. If you read this issue, you'd probably enjoy it, and you probably would forget about it maybe 5 minutes afterwards. That was a big problem with DC, because DC had a very tight editorial ship, and they were worried about getting their comic books on time. This way they didn't incur printing fees, because if you're late with a comic book with the printer would tack on these very large fees. And Marvel was always accruing those fees, but DC wasn't. But DC kind of used a factory system where the writers would alternate between either Elliot Magnin or Cary Bates, and they would go back and forth, and the stories always came out in time because the guys were scheduled that tightly, and they had time to finish their stories. But it sort of, but the thing is, they had to be very general and vague about what they did with the characters, because they couldn't do one thing with the character that would conflict with what the other writer is doing. So you never had the kind of the running serial with DC as you did with Marvel. And that made the comic books better, although, again, it does have some operational weaknesses. So anyway, we'll go into the story. By the way, at this time, the last Planet of the Apes movie from the original franchise was out. So DC was taking advantage of that release, because that was a summer release. And also, they were big believers that gorillas on covers sold more comics. So they were, anytime they had an opportunity to put a gorilla on the cover, they were pretty happy with that. So we'll go into the story proper. It starts at Gorilla City. Gorilla City is a place in the continent of Africa.
My God, it's a city of apes.
They don't state what country it's in, so we just assume that it's somewhere in the continent. It's hidden away. It's highly advanced. They have a functional society that's largely peaceful except for one member, and that is Grodd. And Grodd constantly has to be imprisoned because of his power-thirsty desire to not only control Gorilla City but also the world if he has an opportunity. So this is very atypical. It's kind of atypical of gorilla behavior, because gorillas, for the most part, are fairly gentle creatures in the wild. It's chimpanzees that are homicidal maniacs. But nevertheless, hey, gorillas are big. They're big and impressive looking. Anyway, they have this elaborate system. However, it turns out that Grodd escapes from it. Basically, what they have Grodd on, in a cage. And not only in a cage, but he's on a treadmill. So he's walking, so he's constantly exhausted. And this is kind of a form of torture. And I guess they didn't think of it that way because they say, well, it's happening to a gorilla. But nevertheless, that's kind of torturous. Although it gives you an idea how powerful Grodd is. Nevertheless, he found a way to escape, and he broke out of Gorilla City. Some nicely drawn panels by Curt Swan, Murphy Anderson. Both of them knew how to draw gorillas. At this time, they were still jungle comic books, and they were very popular, a few decades earlier. So these guys kind of knew how to draw Tarzan-like stories. So that's why the gorillas here really draw nicely. However, we go to Metropolis. We see Clark and Lois, and they're investigating a story on Easter parades. Really? Come on. And they're putting a lot of research into this. Again, the art's really nicely drawn here. However, they get a call saying that they actually have some real news for these guys to report on. It turns out that King Soliver, who controls Gorilla City, he wants to make an address to the UN, and he wants to let the world know of their existence.
The only good human is a dead human.
So they were working for the TV station at the time. I forgot what the TV station was called. So the TV guys, they called Clark and Lois, say drop the Easter parade crap and focus on this story going on at the UN. So, and they even mentioned Planet of the Apes movies. So they're not hiding the fact that they were hoping this movie would kind of generate a few extra comic book sales. So, because sometimes that happened, like when Jaws came out, there were a whole bunch of covers with sharks on them. So anyway, Lois is kind of pushing Clark around. Clark's doing all the heavy lifting, which is fine. He's Superman. So then it turns out that the gorilla arrived. And all these dignitaries at the UN, they have to like hello and say and kind of meet and greet with a gorilla. And some
My God, it's a city of apes.
So anyway, they're getting ready to announce that King Soliver, I believe, Chief Soliver, is going to address the UN. He's walking. The chief is walking toward the podium, but Clark is kind of clumsy and he's in the way. And Lois is horrified because of how undignified it looks. However, the chieftain is very understanding. He says, "Hey, that's quite all right. I understand. Because Clark is a little apologetic here, kind of saying, I'm sorry for that. I'm kind of doofus." And Lois is kind of thinking to herself that the gorilla is probably more civilized than Clark. That was kind of a nice little zinger. So anyway, King Soliver's going through his speech. He's a very wise man. He's a very wise gorilla, I should say.
One thing that every good soldier knows, the only thing that counts in the end is power.
Throwing around some real places like the Congo and the Sudan. Yeah, I think it was still called the Congo at the time, before it became, I think, Zaire. So anyway, Chief Soliver, he's still talking to the UN, seeing some members of the UN, and another gorilla shows up at the gate. He overpowers the guard. Then he starts attacking the infrastructure of the UN. This causes what appears to be an earthquake in the building. Clark is like saying, Lois, you should run to safety. Lois is like, hey, we got to report the news. So safety's second, or we'll miss the story. So anyway, Clark can't shake Lois at this point. However, they do get separated because part of the UN building falls down, and as Grodd is just busting this part of the building. Clark uses this as an opportunity to change into Superman. So at this point, he's Superman, and he confronts Grodd. Grodd tells him that he was expecting to see the Flash. The Flash was strange at this time in that, except for Batman, the Flash probably had the best rogues gallery of all the DC characters. The Flash had some really good villains, and I would not have thought that. So anyway, Superman has some decent villains himself. Same way, so the two are encountering each other for the first time. Superman's trying to get physical with Grodd. Grodd is sort of the equal. And Grodd actually overpowers Superman at this point and throws him into the water. So basically at this point, physically, Superman is fighting an equal. And, hey, an equal that can, fling turds, but still, it's an equal. Smelly equal, but still an equal.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
Anyway, the throwing Superman so hard causes a mild rupture in the lake, and basically there's a couple of ships that looks like they're going to submerge and capsize. However, Superman saves both ships. Very mindful of property. Oh, well, there's people on them, so I'm not going to be totally cynical about it. But, hey, Superman cares about property too. Anyway, Grodd is impressed, but he's still fighting Superman in the water. Superman uses an old trick that the Flash taught him. However, Grodd lets Superman know that I kind of know his tricks. So it's a novel to you, but it's not novel to me. He figures out how to stop Superman, as this whirlpool is going around. They're fighting in the water. They're fighting under the lake or sea, if you want to say that. Anyway, two are going back and forth. Superman is knocked out. He's defeated. Grodd throws him to the promenade of the UN, letting the humans know, hey, your champion is no champion anymore. A medic checks Superman out. Superman's lying unconscious, stiff as a board. The medic says that Superman is dying. Lois is beside herself. She can't believe this. And Gorilla Grodd somehow can magically create this whirlpool to elevate himself. He's kind of saying, hey, surrender, humans. That's still on the menu. I already defeated your champion, so let's hand over the world, kind of in an orderly manner. King Soliver sees this, saying, no, you're not going to do this. The two engage in a fight. And as this is happening, Superman is being taken in an ambulance. He looks like he is dying. And Chief Soliver and Gorilla Grodd encounter each other. They're fighting. For the most part, the UN delegates are approving of this. They're happy that King Soliver is trying to take care of Grodd. Grodd is defeated by King Soliver. And the UN guys are happy because King Soliver, or Chieftain Soliver, he was talking about peace and getting along. It's Gorilla Grodd who's talking about, I'm taking over. So it was clear. However, Lois is saying, hold on, Superman died. The greatest man ever died. My romance died. And don't you dare think that this guy saving the world, don't you dare think that takes a backseat to that. So this is Lois being definitely a main character person here. Clark Kent shows up and kind of tries to kind of console Lois about the loss, or that she was expecting. Lois is holding Clark. Again, they're trying to convey an emotional bond here. Lois is saying that I'd always felt that you were Superman, but this sort of proves that you aren't, even though Superman can kind of do everything he wants to do. So anyway, and Lois is saying, hey, I kind of sort of had some feelings for you. So I wanted you to be Superman because I kind of like Clark too. However, Clark is like, no time for romance. We got to do our jobs. Lois agrees with that. She starts interviewing Chief Soliver and kind of getting an interview on his thoughts on things and Superman and so forth.
But those fortunate enough to remain alive will have the privilege of being used by our revered Minister of Science, the good Dr. Zayas.
King Soliver's giving kind of an improv press conference. Now, then we see kind of this very long block of text and saying that, she's interviewing a gorilla as she's mourning the death of Superman. However, Superman calls out. And he calls King Soliver Grodd. And then he uppercuts Grodd, knocks Grodd way into the air, and he looks unconscious, and he's just kind of bitch slapping what looks to be Chief Soliver, but Superman is insistent this is Grodd. So and they're explaining that that somehow Grodd was able to mind switch with King Soliver. So so Grodd was in King Soliver's body, and King Soliver was in Grodd's body. That seems a little complicated. It does wrap things up, but it seems overly complicated. However, Superman figures everything out. He's still alive. He has to return King Soliver's battered body back to Gorilla City, because one, they still have to switch minds, and number two, when Superman was kicking Grodd's ass, he was beating up on King Soliver's body. So King Soliver, he has a whole bunch of bruises on his body that he's gonna have to, the Superman's gonna have to explain to King Soliver to, because he's like, dude, you couldn't pick a less painful way to knock Grodd out, But nevertheless, this is what happened. It seemed Grodd does have some physical pain, but it's not a big deal from the body switch. So, Gorilla City, they have really good medical facilities. The next way of keeping Grodd on ice is to basically hypnotize him for 24 hours a day. They use a spinning wheel, and he's just spouting gibberish, dubba gubba jubba dubba gun. Superman approves of this. This is not torture to Superman. Superman then flies Chief Soliver back to the UN so they can finish up their job. Superman, ever the Union Buster, he fixes the UN. All those Union guys who could have used that overtime. Hey, Superman is not necessarily for all unions. And then the last panel, we see Superman standing next to Lois Lane and Chief Soliver giving an interview, and just kind of like it's kind of a fluff piece at this point.
Beware the beast man, for he is the devil's pawn. Alone among God's primates, he kills for sport, or lust, or greed. Yea, he will murder his brother to possess his brother's land. Let him not breed in great numbers, for he will make a desert of his home and yours. Shun him. Drive him back into his jungle lair, for he is the harbinger of death.
So anyway, that's the end of the Superman portion of Adventure. Action Comics, I should say. I'll get to the Green Arrow one. Before I do, I'm going to take a look at this music club advertisement. These were infamous in the comic books and magazines at the time. And I knew one person who was my half-sister who did this, and she hated it. She didn't know how to commit the mail fraud to get this stuff free. She ended up spending a ton of money on it. How they get you is that you buy the first few selections very cheaply, then you have to pay premium prices, and you have to do so on a regular period. And they made canceling really hard. So anyway, as far as the music, it's good. Yeah, this is 1973 music. Some of the stuff I remember when it was actually new on the radio. And so not all of that is oldie stuff to me. So anyway, the Superman story goes on for 2 more pages.
God damn you! God damn you all to hell!
Guess this is trying to build some character. So anyway, it turns out that Lois, Clark, and Morgan Edge of the TV station, they're watching the interview on tape, and all 3 of them think the interview went really well, and that Lois did a great job, and that their ratings are going to go really high. And I think somehow it turns out that Morgan Edge is kind of angry at Clark. I think Clark was kind of a pussy. He was saying that, when all this action was going on, I was hiding. So Morgan Edge wasn't happy about that. He wasn't happy with Clark kind of being a big sissy. But we know why he did that. Lois and Clark, they're talking together. They're talking about some of the things that Lois said. And Lois had kind of hinted that she was kind of open to a romantic situation with Clark. She was a little vague and distant about it. It wasn't direct. Lois friend zones him, and she friend zones him hard. Clark kind of walks away, kind of seemingly upset, but then he finds a lot of humor in this. I don't know why. It's kind of weird how Lois is like pining for a guy she doesn't really know. So anyway, it's kind of a strange ending. I think. I'm not sure all younger readers would have gotten it. Anyway, upcoming Superman titles. Issue number 265 of Superman, Attacked by the Army of Tomorrow. I never read that issue. The cover is good though. I know the cover. The following issue is Action Comics number 425, and that's going to be in July. And that one's going to have a lot of stories. It's going to have a Superman story in it. It's also going to have an Atom story in it, and it's going to have a Human Target story in it. And usually when it has 3 stories like that, the stories themselves are very short. So I think 425 was Neil Adams' issue. Okay, so before I go to the Green Arrow story, I'll take a look at the letters page. I think the reaction was mixed. I think people are like, hey, you're producing structurally very good comics, but you're not grabbing us emotionally. Okay, so we'll look at the first letter. He likes the cover. It was a Nick Cardy cover. They're usually pretty good. He also liked the Human Target story, and he was also kind of hopeful about Green Arrow. So he kind of likes what he sees with this comic. The next letter, felt that was sort of a downer. Didn't particularly care for the Superman story. And he didn't like the Human Target either. So he had 2 stories in that comic, and he disliked both. He regretted spending his 20 cents. He did like the cover though. And let's see what else. The next one, Made to Order, did not like the Superman. Oh no, he liked the Superman story. And he liked the Human Target, but he felt that the art was better than the story. Okay, another one. So they're kind of the criticisms are balancing here. This guy liked the Superman story. He's kind of lukewarm on Human Target. Yeah, it doesn't look like the Human Target has much of a fan base here, and I think it kind of went away shortly afterwards. Megan's writing, that's Elliot Megan. Megan, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He was a pretty good writer, but like I said, he had to deal with those kind of DC editorial decisions not to serialize the comics. So he had to be more kind of like gimmick oriented rather than character oriented, which Marvel was doing. He doesn't care for the art, so this is a rare criticism of Swan and Anderson. Kurt Swan wasn't a great artist in terms of a dynamic artist, but he drew beautiful faces. He drew beautiful women. And they sort of move like regular people. So he likes the stories, but he doesn't really like the art. He wants Kurt Schaffenberg back. And they kind of mentioned that he, kind of, yeah, they're kind of, letting him know that Kurt Schaffenberg's doing other things. And that's it as far as the letters page. Take a look at Green Arrow. It's kind of a silly story. The Candy Kitchen Caper. Green Arrow never really had a great rogues gallery. It's amazing that the TV show lasted as long as it did, because it's not like Green Arrow was able to supply many great villains. And it was always sort of like that, even during the Mike Grell run. But nevertheless, we'll take a look at this silly story. It's Elliot Magden, and the art is by Dick Dillon and Dick Diagano. Dick Diagano, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, is a comic book legend. He was best known as being an inker, although he would, at time to time, he would draw issues, but he was largely known as an inker. One of the great inkers. He was I think he was the guy who finished up a lot of the stuff at DC. They probably relied heavily on him. Dick Dillon was one of their regular artists. Be honestly, kind of hack artwork. I remember growing up, and I would read his Justice Leagues. I mean, they were fine. Again, not great artwork, let's be honest. Same way we see two masked figures breaking into a museum. Turns out, for really no good reason, the Green Arrow's there. He uses his arrow to kind of to stop the robbery from going on. The alarm is set off. Green Arrow is taking care of the masked intruders, but the night watchman, he gets in the way. He hits Green Arrow. The distraction allows the robbers to escape. So they didn't get what they wanted, but they weren't captured either. Because of this slowdown, Green Arrow wasn't able to stop them. I'm not quite sure why he was so invested in that, but nevertheless, it's the next day. Green Arrow is in his identity, which is Oliver Queen. And no offense, he kind of looks like one with this look, with that particular goatee and hairstyle. So anyway, and he even has a turtleneck sweater on. So anyway, he sees a candy shop. He likes the brownies that he's seeing. I'm not quite sure if they're magic or not. I don't think so. But nevertheless, Oliver Queen, he loves these brownies so much that he's going to do everything he can to make sure the entire city knows how wonderful these brownies are. So it takes a little bit of self-centeredness to do this. To say, you know what, I got to let the whole city know how much I really enjoy these. And you need to enjoy this too, because I enjoy them so much. So anyway, the shop owner and the baker, she's kind of like, she's charmed by this, but she's like, I can't afford to pay this. And he says, no, don't worry about it, I'll do it for free. In the back, there are two guys who are kind of taking an interest in what's going on. They're looking through a two-way mirror, so they establish a two-way mirror. And one of the guys doesn't understand why Oliver Queen is so emotionally wrapped up in this. And he's saying this guy could be, trouble. They're trying to cut a diamond here, which is kind of a hard thing to do. But what happens? It turns out that the store is a front for the criminal operation of those thieves from earlier. So the masked thieves that tried to break into the museum are actually these guys. and the bakery shop is a front, and it just happens that the legal aspect of this business is run pretty competently. So Oliver Queen, he's kind of doing some silly stuff. He's walking around with kind of one of those signs that you would see guys in LA doing, and flipping around, giving out free samples. He's even going to like the media and saying, you know, during the newscast, can you find a way of mentioning how much you enjoy these brownies? This is weird. Okay, so anyway, before I go back to the story, I'm going to take a look at this page here. And it's DC's mail order subscription service. And I think Plop was the new title that was out, and they were hoping that Plop could somehow kind of compete with Mad Magazine for a humor title. They were kind of hoping that maybe there was a market for it, and that kids would kind of gravitate to it. The problem is that Plop, for the most part, wasn't very funny. Mad was pretty funny most of the time. None of these other comic book humor books were funny. I didn't think Plop was funny. I didn't think Arg was funny. And there were a few others. The funniest comics I thought were the early Justice League Internationals from the late 80s by Jim DeMatteis and Keith Giffen. Those were hilarious. So you will see Superman, the superhero lineup, and we see action, adventure. Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane still had their own books along with Superboy. Superboy would continue. It actually would have a much better run. World's Finest was still around, and Brave and the Bold, the Flash. Wow, if you take Superman out of this, if you take Superman and Batman out of these titles, you don't have much. So anyway, wow, those two would dominate, and I guess everyone else was kind of the Flash. The Flash could support his own title. Okay, we see the mystery books. DC did mystery pretty good. They did mystery much better than Marvel did. And this is why so many of their kind of mystery titles were able to hang around for decades. They were also better with the genre stuff, like romance. DC's romance titles were generally better than Marvel's. My favorite are the Charleston ones, because the creators had so much control, and the editorial didn't care too much. So sometimes they would really go overboard with those stories. They were still having war comics at the time. Never understood who was buying them. Even though I think I bought maybe one or two issues as a kid. And the adventure comics, I love Commandy. Didn't really care for the others. So anyway, going back to the story, we see Oliver Queen. He's throwing a big shindig for this small little brownie shop. The owner likes it. She loves the attention. She loves all the new customers. The crooks are kind of like freaking out a little, because this place was just supposed to be a front for their criminal operation, but they can't perform any of their criminal activities because their hideout has too much attention. So basically the legal part of their enterprise is too successful. And Oliver Queen is taking pictures. They're freaking out because they're criminals. So they don't want anyone recognizing them. And then there's definitely some cutting here. The story went on too long. They had to make a hard edit here, because the guys grab Oliver Queen and his camera, and then the next panel you see him coming out of a room as Green Arrow, and the dialogue box explains what happened in between, But the fact that they did it this way indicates that they had to cut this story down a little. So yeah, I mean, it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't create a good comic experience. So anyway, Green Arrow, he approaches the villains. They throw chocolate at him. People are just running, grabbing these chocolate. It doesn't matter that they're picking it up off the street. And the streets in 1970s were not that clean, not as clean as today. Nevertheless, Green Arrow is stopped by all these kind of people who are rushing over like pigeons to pick up these chocolate fudge brownies. Oliver Queen uses his trick arrow to kind of catapult himself out of the crowd. He's currently in air because his arrows attached themselves to a lamppost and yanked them out. And Oliver Queen, from that height, he was able to fire off a couple of his arrows. He stops the criminal's car because they had jumped into a car to escape. Turns out the criminals were hold of a bunch of cut diamonds. So this kind of is an indication that they did not get those diamonds legally. The police came. The police arrested the guys. They're gonna serve long jail terms. And Oliver Queen, he doesn't get anything out of this really, but nevertheless, someone's property was protected, which seemed to be a big motivator for superheroes in the 70s. Anyway, the woman who was the baker for the criminal front, she didn't know what was going on. So she's innocent of this. But nevertheless, the place was closed when the two guys were captured. However, Green Arrow lets her know that they kind of bought her another shop, free and clear. We like these brownies so much that we're going to pile on all this debt. So anyway, it's a good story for her. So the criminals were caught. The baker has a thriving business. Oliver Queen realizes he did all this work and he got nothing out of it, but he doesn't even enjoy the kiss that he gets. However, Oliver Queen firmly established heterosexual in a relationship with Black Canary. So we got to make sure that's told, because those guys in the 70s were actually worried about stuff like that. So nevertheless, that's my review of Action Comics, issue number 424, from dated June 1973, probably came out in the spring. Okay, and I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.